Hey, good morning, Drive Time. Welcome back. As always, I'm David Drum. Today, we are joined by Will Hutcherson. For those of you who attend Cape Christian, you'll remember Will from just a couple of weeks ago. He came in and spoke to us concerning his new book, Seen, which is Seen, Healing the Despair and Anxiety in Kids and Teens Through the Power of Connection. Will is also the founder of Curate Hope, which is a nonprofit. And he's joining us today to talk not just about his book, but really how that power of connection starts with us, and not just in our minds, but our hearts. And he's got a lot to say about that. So, Will, what the people watching or listening don't know is you and I go back probably 15-ish years.
I believe that, right? Yeah.
You have mentored and interacted with both of my sons. You've been around our family for a long time, and it's been a lot of fun for our family to watch your progression through your pastoral role and out into the world of nonprofits and traveling, internationally. And now to have you write this book and even come in and speak at our church, it's just been really enjoyable to watch and be a part of. So it's a lot of fun and exciting for me to have you here. So welcome to Drive Time, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Dave. I think, when you remind me how long we've known each other, I think about, oh my goodness, you knew me as a young youth pastor when I was like 23. And I'm like, I just want to go and apologize to all those kids, because when you're 23, you know it all. And so you just come out hot and heavy and,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I don't even want to think about where I was at 23.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Thanks for having me. And for all you guys who are watching or listening, thanks for tuning in. And today we're going to talk a lot about just specifically our hearts. And Dave and I, right before we started recording, we're kind of talking about this whole concept that, yes, in the coming weeks, we're going to also talk about like connecting with the heart of our kids and helping our kids to feel seen, or our spouse to feel seen, or people that you care about, maybe grandkids to feel seen and to connect with their heart. But also, what about our hearts? Like, how do we connect with even our own hearts? And the Bible talks about the heart a lot, right? We read that. I mean, one of the most famous passages that I think about every time I think about the heart is Proverbs 4, where it says, guard your heart above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. But, we read about the heart. Even Jesus said, the greatest commandment is love the Lord God with all of your heart, mind, strength, right? But where is our heart? Because obviously we know, as we read the Bible, we're not talking about the literal organ that pumps blood through our body. We're talking about something more metaphorical. We're talking about the heart that kind of exists in this place of our being that is a part of our psychology. And so the way that I like to think about the heart is really understanding that we are made in the image of God, which means we are made in the image of a triune, 3-in-1 God. So God is 3-in-1, and I think very much we are 3-in-1. So we have the body, the physical body, but we also have a heart and a mind. And, some people would say there's a soul component of that. And I do think that is true. There's a soul, but the soul is almost like the all-encompassing part of who we are. And then we have our spirit, right? The Spirit of God that dwells in us, that Christ has made alive again. But when I think about this heart-mind combination, Jesus actually, when he talks about the greatest commandment, he kind of talks about 4 components, right? But when we just break it down into 3, it's kind of, the spirit, the mind/heart, and then our physical body. But this mind-heart component of who we are isn't necessarily, like I said, a physical organ that pumps blood, but it's really two parts of our brain. That our brain is compiled of two primary big functions. You have the logical left side of your brain, which is a lot of your reasoning, a lot of your language processing. And then you have the emotional side of your right side of your brain. So that's where, fear and fight or flight kind of exist, and a lot of your emotional processing. That is what I think God's talking about when he talks about the heart. He's really talking about the right side of our brain. And I think the problem, and so this is kind of what I want to propose. So here the Bible talks about the heart a whole lot. But yet, as men, we've grown up in a culture that has essentially told us, ignore your heart, forget about what you feel, suck it up, buttercup, and just make it happen, right? And the problem with that is, over time, we can kind of become detached and desensitized from our own heart and kind of lose touch with what we're really feeling and what's really going on. I also think that at times we can think that emotions are like anti-faith. But the reality is, when we look at the life of Jesus, we saw Jesus 100% man and 100% God, 100% filled with faith and knowing. I mean, it wasn't hard for Jesus necessarily have faith because he knew what the outcome was going to be. He's all knowing, powerful God, 100% God, but also 100% man. And yet, even in that, Jesus felt a whole lot. His heart was huge. And you saw that come out. You saw him, allow his heart to be processed. I think about Matthew 5:5, Jesus said, mourn with those who mourn. And then he showed us that. He gave us that example when he's mourning at the tomb of Lazarus. But here's the problem. The problem is that sometimes we look at the life of Jesus and we only look at it through a logical lens. In fact, I once heard one theologian who explained, the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept, John 11. I heard one person say, Jesus wasn't weeping because he was sad. Jesus was weeping because of the lack of faith that he saw around him. And it just, once again, like sometimes we can approach the life of Jesus and we look at it from just such a logical standpoint, where sometimes it's even hard for us to comprehend, how could Jesus have just simply been sad? Because sadness, in that belief system, sadness means a lack of faith. But that's not true. Our heart is our heart, and our heart was made to feel feelings, and feelings are okay. Feelings are just feelings, right? But not every feeling should be acknowledged. And I think that's where we get lost, because we know that sometimes our feelings can lead us to bad choices, right? We all know that as men. And so sometimes I think it's like, well, feelings are bad, then keep them over there and just not have feelings. Well, that would make us Buddhists. That's kind of the goal of Buddhism, but that's not the goal of Christianity. The goal of Christianity is well, one, there is no works within us. I mean, it is Christ and Christ alone. It is by grace, but there's a fullness of life. And part of that fullness of life that I believe Jesus wants to experience is the fullness of allowing our soul, our whole being, mind, body, spirit, to be whole, to be complete. That includes allowing our heart to truly be what it's made to be and how it was designed to be. And that is to feel feelings. And feelings are okay. And as I'm saying that, knowing that I'm saying it to a whole bunch of men, I'm like, they're probably turning me off right now. They're probably, switching off this podcast and being like, man, I don't need to talk to this spiky haired feelings guy,
Well, but we talked about it a little bit before you got started. Like, so if we're talking the two sides of the brain, and we as men tend to stay in that left side analytical thinking, and really the only feelings that ever come in are the ones that are like raging, like you said, shouldn't necessarily be acknowledged, but those are the only ones that ever overpower the logic side of it. Yeah. So how do we as guys who live in that left brain side start to bridge that gap into the heart or the right side of the brain.
Well, and let me just say this. So my natural processing, so I wrote a book on feelings and connection. I talk a lot about feelings nowadays. My natural processing and the way that I'm wired is not necessarily to be an overly emotional person. Like on the Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTJ. So if you're familiar with personality testing, I am a logically, analytical minded individual. A lot of my work ends up being very analytical. Even my writing, kind of comes out that way. I look at things conceptually. That's just kind of how my natural wiring is. But with that, I've had to really, spend a whole lot of time with Jesus and recognizing that there's another part of me that I have to allow, to be present. And the more I've gotten okay with feeling feelings, and again, if just acknowledging feelings, even not acting on every feeling, but just even acknowledging like, okay, this anger that I'm feeling, there's actually something deeper to that. And if I can acknowledge it, if I can go down a little bit deeper than just anger and acknowledge maybe I feel betrayed or I feel disrespected or I feel annoyed or humiliated, right? That takes me to a more vulnerable place. But here's why this is so important. Because when we allow ourselves to feel feelings, then ultimately, the more comfortable we're okay with allowing ourselves to feel feelings, the more comfortable we're going to allow others to feel feelings too. And that's huge when it comes to connecting with the heart of others, because we have to be able to empathize with ourselves before we can give empathy to other people in our life. So some of us men, we want to become better at empathy. We want to be better at seeing our spouse and seeing the heart of the people that we love and not necessarily hurting them unintentionally with our logical minded answers. Like we want to do better. But sometimes we're slow to get there because we haven't been doing the inner work of allowing ourselves to have our own kind of emotional exhale, right? That was another thing I talked about on Sunday morning at Cape Christian is that the right side of the brain, sometimes we can ignore it so much and we stuff our emotions and we just don't acknowledge it, that it feels like we're taking in all this emotional energy and we're just holding it in. And that can leave the brain, specifically the right side of our brain, our heart, to just kind of getting overwhelmed with anxiety and worry and despair and even feeling numb over time. This emotional detachment takes place. So here's what I want to kind of leave you with. And here's kind of, now that I've said all that, allow yourself to emotionally exhale. Well, how do you do that? Well, I'm going to give you a really simple tool and challenge you to one thing this week. There's a tool called the feelings wheel. You can get it, with this podcast in the notes, or you can go to the scene, SEEN book.com, thescenebook.com, and you can download the feelings wheel. But what this is the feelings wheel is a helpful tool that allows us to identify a core feeling. So there's 6 core feelings of angry, happy, sad, scared. These are the ones where we kind of like start with. We're all pretty good at like, well, I'm mad, I'm a simple-minded guy. So it's easy for me to be like, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm disgusted, like those are the easy core emotions. But then the wheel kind of breaks those core emotions down into the next kind of step, and then the next step after that. And the reason why this is so important is as we experience different things and we train our brains to be able to take some of that emotional energy we're feeling in our heart and actually shift it over to the left side of our brain where we can exhale it out. The more we do that, the more empathy we're going to have for ourselves, the more we're going to allow our heart to truly feel seen. And it's going to increase a vulnerability between us and the people around us and our relationship with God. It kind of allows us to just connect a little bit more with our Heavenly Father because we're being honest about what we're really experiencing, and the people around us because we're being honest about what we're really feeling. So again, not every feeling should be acted upon, but every feeling should be acknowledged. And I think if we get better at acknowledging every one of our feelings and we allow ourselves to do that, we're going to be able to do that for the people around us a lot more.
And that's really good. I'm sitting here looking at the feeling wheel right now, and it makes a lot of sense how you can kind of work through from, I'm mad, or I'm happy, or I'm disgusted, out through those circles, and really kind of put my finger on, well, that's the issue. I actually feel disrespected. I'm not just mad, I feel disrespected. And like you said, that helps you process it a little bit more, which guys are better at the logical task. So, all right, guys, now as we wrap up this week, Will's already kind of given you your step to look at this wheel and start analyzing, maybe in your devotional time, what that feeling is. Maybe you're on your way to work right now, and the minute you walk in, you're going to be ticked off about something. Every day when you walk in, this is the thing that sets you off. And when your boss says this, or you get assigned this task, start applying this today, where you can start looking at why does it bother me every time, Bob's standing at the water cooler and he says this one line to me? Why does it bother me? Maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not so obvious. And here's the thing, guys. Come back next week and the following weeks, because Will's really going to start to unpack why it matters beyond just us being able to process our feelings, why it matters to those around us. Because, as he referenced, the greatest commandment, love God, love people. That's great, to love God and to process your emotions and be better at dealing with them yourself. But it's all going to ultimately turn into, how are we loving other people? And if we're not doing a good job taking care of our own, if we can't take care of our own house, we can't take care of everybody else. So that's going to be your one step for this week. Will, I can't thank you enough for being here. It's a lot of fun, again, because of our history, to be able to jump back in and unpack some of this stuff. So, gentlemen, thank you for being here. We'll see you next week. And Will, thank you.